Hey there, good evening everyone. Welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph, I'm the host of this show. This is a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So this is the show I normally do Wednesday nights called Wednesday Night Favorites. Not really going to be a favorites thing, it's not a top 25 or a top 10 or a favorite this or a favorite that. Today we're just going to do a list of 10 bands that I think they made a certain amount of success in their career. They got to a certain level, but they should have been at a higher level. That may be a band that was maybe like a level 2 band, should have been a level 1 band, or that band should have become an iconic band, or maybe they were iconic, but for some reason the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has decided that they don't deserve to be in there. So I just want to give a little more attention to these bands I think should be considered better than they actually are. Or more importantly, they should be bigger than they actually were. So we're going to start with, I'm doing this kind of alphabetically. Actually, I'm doing this alphabetically. I'm not kind of. That's what we're doing. Okay, so the first band is this band, Blue Oyster Cult. Just pick 2 or 3 of their albums out to show you what they look like in case you're familiar with one or the other. So these particular 3 albums I picked out for Blue Oyster Cult are all really solid albums. And so Blue Oyster Cult was a band that formed in 1967 in New York City. They got 15 studio albums. All pretty solid stuff. They have 2 big hits. Don't Fear the Reaper, which was on Agents of Fortune, this album, and Burnin' For You, which was on Fire of Unknown Origin, which is this album. But they've had other big hits. Astronomy should have been a huge monster hit as well. Got some stuff on some of their other albums. Godzilla, there's one on Cultosaurus Erectus. So lots of really good stuff that's radio friendly. But then they also had a ton of deep cuts. The band is proliferated with deep cuts. They're a band with 5 members. At one point, all the members sang in the band at different points. They've got, all the albums are different. You've got some that are more progressive, some that are heavier, some that are more quirky, make a lot of quirky songs, some poppy stuff, some almost kind of almost a few that are kind of a little bit psychedelic. So this is a band that was big in the United States, not so big in the rest of the world. They should have been, in my opinion, they should have been a big band. They should have been, they could have easily been in that same echelon with a group like Van Halen. They deserved to be up in that echelon, and for whatever reason, they just didn't quite make that level. So that's my first band that I'm talking about today, Blue Oyster Cult. They become a band for me. I started out listening to this album. I liked it a lot. It was one of my favorite albums of the year I got it. And then I just never pursued them past that. I never went past that. I tried to get Cultosaurus Erectus. It was hard to find. That was the one people told me to get. And I just never went beyond the first album until a few years ago when I started this channel. And then I got a couple more. I got these were the 2 actually that I got. And from that point on, I was hooked. I now love this band. I think they're destined for me to make my group bigger. My group of 8 will be bigger with them in it. Eventually, they're going to get there. I'm almost sure of it. And to me, they're a no-brainer. They should have been a bigger band than they were. So the next band up, also a B, is this group, Boston. Second album, Don't Look Back. Third album, Third Stage. Debut album. This was a monster album. So they came out of the gate, hit a home run right out of the gate with this album, their debut album. Fantastic album, sold about $17 million. in albums. And then they came right back with this one, sold about 7 million. Really good sophomore album. Then they took a while to come out with a third stage, and then it got longer between albums. And this, I think, hurt them, because I think they were destined to be a upper echelon big band, like in with that group of iconic bands. But they never quite made it beyond that debut album. They never achieved anything beyond that, and I think you might call them a tier 2 band. Maybe they're a little bit bigger than Blue Oyster Cult. I think more people would know who they are. But they could have been a Hall of Fame band. They could have been an iconic band. They could have been a super band, and they just didn't make it because they had issues with the record label. There was fighting between the main guy, Tom Schultz, and the record labels. And there was lawsuits and stuff, and it just took too long for them to put out another album, and they just kind of and the albums got weaker, and they just didn't make it to that next step, and it's unfortunate because I think they're a great band. And of course they were formed in 1975, so it's been like 48 years. They've only done 6 albums. Not very strong that way. Unfortunately, they're a band that could have been something, and they just didn't achieve it. The next band up, this band, maybe in the same category as Blue Oyster Cult, maybe a tier 2 band. They didn't have the hits though that Blue Oyster had, but they had a lot of really solid stuff. We're talking about this band, Gentle Giant. This is Freehand. Then you've got Three Friends. This is also the cover for their debut album. That's part of their issue. And then you have this album, Acquiring the Taste. This is a absolute great album, fantastic. As is the Freehand, and a lot of their stuff is really good. Some of the albums I haven't acquired yet, like In a Glass House, which is a fantastic album. Yeah, this is just a very strong group. So they came out in 1970. They were the 3 brothers who had been with a band called Simon Dupuis, folded the band and then restarted a new band, but completely changed the direction of the music. They weren't doing any pop anymore. They weren't doing any of that. They just moved, or any blues. They moved right into this kind of progressive, just very progressive music. Like, there's nobody that sounds like Gentle Giant, in my opinion. They are just so good. If they had some progressive, maybe one hit would have been the thing that got their known. And but now they're really well loved band. They just never made that upper echelon, and they should have, in my opinion. They should have been a band in with all of those bands like Rush and Yes and all them. Definitely could have qualified. They had the instrumentation. They had the songs were really well written. Everybody who sang in the band, the 2 Showman brothers and Carrie Meniere, all were good singers. They all had quirky little gifts that all the bands were multi-instrumentalists, basically, to put it. And they had a strong run of really strong albums from their debut right through. But they just didn't quite make it, and I think part of it is they kind of folded up after 10 years. If they'd continued on, I think they would have continued to grow too. But I guess progressive rock to them was dead at that point in 1980, so they didn't want to do the commercial stuff, so they just faded away. So the next band that we're going to do is a band that I had to think about this. I had somebody else in their place, and then I decided, you know what? The band I had was a Canadian band, but I have 2 Canadian bands already in the list, so I didn't want to go overboard with it. So I took them out and I put these guys in. Hawkwind. Of course, this is their biggest album. This is a more recent release of their album. I only got the 2 right now. Have a third one. I was hoping it would be here today, but my order from Laser's Edge came, but I had put it in the other order. I ordered from Laser's Edge. I ordered 2 sets of CDs to come. The other one will have it, but unfortunately the video's tonight, so I couldn't display it. Anyways, this is a band, very prolific, lots and lots of albums. I think there's like 17 or 19. I think there's 19 albums by them. They've been around since 1969. So, and I believe are they Scottish? I think they're Scottish band. Anyways, they had a couple of hits. One of them on this album, not a massive hit. It's the opening song, I believe. Yeah, the psychedelic warlord disappear in the smoke. Not a huge radio-friendly band, not a lot of hits or anything like that, but solid album after solid album after solid album. They just never quite produced that that run of 2 or 3 albums that just would put them over the top. So they're a solid band. It should have been at least a tier 2. Probably could have been a tier 1 too, but they just didn't quite have that kind of success to put them there. But I think they're very underrated as well. So Hawkwind. The next band is pretty well known now. A lot of people have jumped on the bandwagon with this band, and myself included. I did not listen to anything from them for 40 years after I learned about them. And I learned about them from Yes. Yes was my favorite band at the time, or one of my 2 favorite bands at the time. And their drummer went and joined this group, and I just never followed them. I don't know why. I don't know. There's no logical reason. Now I have about a dozen of their albums, including this one, King Crimson, in the Court of the Crimson King, Lark's Aspen in Tongues, and sorry, I got that backwards. Lark's Tongues in Aspic. I'm thinking, like, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, maybe I'm getting tired. But anyways, and then this one, Red. So all really good. I could have chosen any of the other albums too. They have no bad albums. Their albums are absolute, all great albums. They had lots of different eras of their band, different musicians coming in, playing for a few albums, going out, another guy. The main guy, Robert Fripp, he was in the band from the beginning. It was his vision. The whole band was his vision, and that was the way he wanted it. I don't think they made enough albums, but the albums they made are like top shelf progressive rock band. This band is getting its accolades from people who recognize their greatness now, but they never quite made that commercial jump or that jump to that next level where Yes and Genesis and all them are. They're like a level below it, but they belong in that level with those bands. I am certain of that. There is no doubt in my mind that they belong in that same level. Just so many good musicians, so many good songs, so many good albums. You know, the current one in my playlist, that's been on my playlist the longest, is their second album, In the Wake of Poseidon. And it's been up there about, I'm going to say it's been up there 7-8 months now, easily. And all their albums are like that. They're just all so good. So there you go, King Crimson. So that's 5 bands. Now we'll get into the second group of 5 here. I'm just going to move the stack closer to me so I don't have to reach and break my back, which is hurting to begin with. Yes, here we go. Traffic and bad back has tired me to the point of wanting to finish this, but to be honest with you, I wanted to do this. I look forward to doing this all day. I put it together, and I'm happy to do it. It's something I think needs to be talked about on this channel anyways. These are the kind of things that make me want to be on this channel, is this kind of a video. So the next band out is a band that I discovered on this channel. My first album was this one, Tab in the Ocean, and hit a home run right off the bat. The second album I didn't like as much, but it also is very good. Recycled. This album I like less, but it has some good points to it as well. Time Machine. I have another one that's coming through to go on my playlist soon. This is a band that some great instrumentation by all the members of the band here. Fantastic songwriting, some really memorable tracks. A band that just was big in Germany for some reason and parts of Europe, but never really hit it in the North American, and they almost did with this album here. It just came out a little late, or they just missed the tour. I think it was both. I think the album was a little bit late, but they didn't tour it the way it was supposed to be toured, and they just never were able to get off the ground here in North America. As it is, they're probably in the same boat with Blue Oyster called Gentle Giant, like a tier 2 band that could have been and should have been a much bigger band than they were. So Nectar. Okay, moving on. This is the 7th group now. This is a band will surprise people because they were a huge band. They made that level 1. 4 or 5 albums in, they made that level 1. Supertramp, Crime of the Century. Supertramp, Breakfast in America. Supertramp, This is Crime of the Century. This is Even in the Quietest Moments. I stand corrected. Okay, so they had lots of really good stuff in this late 70s, early 80s. All 3 of these albums did well. This one was the big one, of course. This one was the big one, of course. Commercially, anyways. Had lots of really solid stuff. Even their early stuff was good. Later stuff wasn't so bad. But they kind of faded out. After Roger Hodgson left the band, they just kind of faded away. And a lot of people don't even know about them now, which is the reason I'm doing them here. Is to me, they were as big as any of the big bands of the day. The Pink Floyds, Led Zeppelins, Queen, all those big bands that were around, Rush, all those bands that were big in the 80s, they were as big as any of them. And they faded to a point where a lot of people don't even know who they are, which is, to me, a real shame. This band deserves to be and should be an iconic band. And if I have anything to say about it, I will continue to push them so that people don't forget who they are. I think part of the problem with Supertramp is that their music is a little on the poppy side. And pop music, for some reason, for the most part, doesn't tend to have a very longevity type feel to it. It doesn't carry as well in the long distance, unless, of course, you're the Beatles. But other than that, it's just, I think that's what's happened to them. They just haven't put out anything for so long, and their music was kind of poppy, and a lot of this generation just doesn't know who they are, and that's unfortunate because they should be an iconic band. Okay, moving right along. So we have another band that fits in with that Blue Oyster called Gentle Giant. Boston, if you prefer. All those bands should have been bigger than they are. This band fits right in there. Thin Lizzy. This is Thunder and Lightning. I also have Jailbreak. The third one I don't have yet. Just beginning to get into their discography. I've listened to a lot of their stuff over the years, but I never actually owned any albums till recently by them. But, they were just starting. The album before this was big. This album had the Boys Are Back in Town. This one had Cold Sweat on it. Some well-known radio staples of the time. If they'd done a couple more albums, I think it could have pushed them into that stratosphere, and they would have been in with the Rushes and the Pink Floyds in that upper stratosphere. But they just didn't quite make it. Their vocalist died in the early 80s after this album, actually not too long after this album, but and they just never They never quite made that that jump. They were close. I think they were closer than Blue Oyster Cult or Gentle Giant. They were right on that line of making that next step, and they just didn't make it. But they deserve to make it, because to me their music is fantastic. Their deep cuts are as good as anything their radio stuff is. So now we're going to move on to the next band. This is a Canadian band who I think did very well when they first came out. Had a bit of a unique sound, but at the same time had a sound that was also very familiar. So we're talking about the Tea Party. This is a great album, Edge of Twilight. And another Tea Party, and I have one that's in my playlist now too. So this is a band that they have, that guy has that Jim Morrison sound to his voice. Some of their music sounds kind of Led Zeppelin-ish. So they're in that field. I think they're a band that maybe not quite as big as the Blue Oyster Cults and Gentle Giants of the world, but definitely within that range, and could easily have made that jump to a huge band. But for some reason they just didn't quite make it, and I'm not really sure why. They seem to have all the right ingredients to do so. Yeah, the Tea Party. Okay, so the last band, another Canadian band. I saved the two Canadian ones for last. I was going to include Bachman Turner Overdrive here, but to be honest with you, I think BTO may have actually overachieved. Yeah, they didn't. They're not an iconic band. They're not one of the elite bands. They're not even maybe a level 2 band. But they kind of faded away, and I'm not sure why they faded away. I'm only mentioning them now because they were originally supposed to be in this list. I only took them out is because they weren't on the verge of making the jump. They were on the way down. That's why I took them out. So I added this band in, Triumph, another Canadian band from Toronto, home of the Rushters. 3 good albums here, Allied Forces. Many consider this their best album. This is my personal favorite, Triumph. Just a Game is actually my second favorite album from all time. This is a band that had that run from like 78 right through 78, 79, right through like the early 80s, 83, 84. And they were right up there. They were right in that mix with all those big bands. But I don't know what happened. They just fell off. Rick Emmett left the band. And they never really, I don't think they produced anything for decades now. And they're kind of like April Wine in that way, in that they just faded away. And like, you know, some people know who they are. Obviously people watch this channel know how good of a band they are, but a lot of people don't know who they are. And they should be a band that's right in there with Rush. They should be like 1-2 with Rush right there. And they just aren't there. I don't think they're there anymore. They were at one point. I'm not really sure what happened to them. Maybe they just they peaked at a point and just weren't able to overcome and change their music. Maybe not go so much commercial. Maybe they went too far commercial. But they should be a band that are well known, and in my opinion. Great guitar player, great drummer, really good bass player. You got 2 really strong vocalists, a guitar player that is like everything you want in your rock guitar player. Can play acoustic, can play classical bits, can play great rhythm, can play fantastic leads, everything you want. You got a drummer with a fantastic voice as well, who can really belt it out, and just a lot of memorable tracks. So should have been a bigger band than they are. So there you go. There's my 10 bands that should have been bigger than they are, and they just didn't quite, for whatever reason, didn't quite make that jump to the next level. But for me, all these bands should be bigger than they are. They're among my favorite bands. Blue Oyster Cult, Gentle Giant, Hawkwind, King Crimson, Supertramp, Triumph, Thin Lizzy, Boston, Nectar, and the Tea Party. That was the last one. So a couple of other bands that I've made note of too that I could have put, I had in this list and I just removed them. I had Jethro Tull here, and that may surprise some people because, well, Jethro Tull's a great band. We all know they're an upper echelon band. Yes, they are. Are they not an upper echelon band? Are they not in there with the likes of The Who, Led Zeppelin, Rush, Pink Floyd? I mean, maybe they're not quite as big as any of those bands, but they're right there. They should be there. To me, they're an iconic band. Why are they not in the Hall of Fame? All those other bands are. They should be in there too. But they're not a band that I put on the list today. BTO, we've already talked about. That's a band they didn't. So there's another band, a little bit different, this band. So this band is completely an Australian band. Never really made it big outside of there. Had a little taste of tea, but never really got off of the Land Down Under. Big down in Land Down Under, well known, lots of albums, right there with all those other great bands. But for some reason they just didn't make it off the island, off of the continent of Australia and make it big. They should have been an international success. And we're talking about the Angels. I'm not sure what the issue is. I know they had to use a different name when they came to North America. They had to use Angel City. Maybe that hurt them. Maybe they didn't get on the right tour group. Maybe they didn't get in with the right bands. Maybe they didn't have the right management over here. I'm not sure what it was with them. I haven't delved into them too far. But I just know from listening to their music. Their music, if it's just about the music, they're there with all of these bands. They would definitely be in that level 2 for sure. They definitely belong with those Blue Oyster Cults in them. You know, one hit could have been the big difference right there. So there you have it. 10 bands that should have been bigger than they are, in my opinion. You know. Do you agree with all these bands? Is there maybe somebody else in here that I completely didn't think of that you think should go in here? Of course, there's quite a few bands I've not gotten into yet that maybe they fit into this category as well. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed the video for what it was. It's just a little bit of speculation, the old what if, right? You know. And I just wanted to give some more attention to these bands who I think deserve it. So there you go. I hope you have a good day. Please like and subscribe, and this will come out pretty much right after I do this up. And you have yourself a good evening and enjoy the video. Take care.